I did want to ask you about the election from the perspective of like the economy and markets, because you have a probabilistic framework, which I really like about how you look at everything. And I'm just wondering, like, do you think about things like elections in terms of how they might impact the market, or do you kind of just discard them? I don't know who's going to win. I don't know what's going to happen. Like, how do you think about that in your framework?
I think in general, when you're thinking about particularly fiscal policies, and of course, fiscal policies connect to elections, right? Because the elected officials are the ones implementing the fiscal policies. You don't have to necessarily meaningfully speculate on this stuff to get ahead of it. Like, you're much better off through time. If you just look through time, you're much better off. Like, wait till they pass the legislation, understand what the macroeconomic consequence of the legislation is, pencil that out, bet on those macroeconomic consequences. Like, in general, you're much better off doing that. And you could get totally caught up and tie yourself into knots trying to bet on, whether or not the political winds will blow this way or blow that way. And the reason why that is like, I sort of say, like, things that determine political outcomes are not, the question is whether you have edge. Do you have edge in determining the political outcome? And I'll say this very bluntly. I do not have edge in determining what the political outcome will be. What's the likelihood that we'll have a new administration? Like, I don't know, whatever PredictIt says. Better, it's as good as anything I could come up with, right? Or, various forecasts and models. I mean, maybe you don't want to focus on just one forecast or model, but like, I'm just saying, like, there's probabilistic models. Am I better than a probabilistic model? Like, no, I'm not better than a probabilistic model. That's not my area of expertise. What I can understand is what are the likely policies that are going to be implemented by both paths, right? If the 60% that would go this way or the 40% that would go that way, given the probabilistic model, and what are the macroeconomic consequences of that? But even there, what I'd say is there's still a lot of uncertainty. Like, tell me what a new administration's set of policies are going to be. Like, who the heck knows? It depends on, do they get elected? Do they have the House? Do they have the Senate? How much does it get watered down? Like, who knows, right? And so, like, you get lost in all of those things. And the reality is, like, you're probably going to be fine just waiting to see when the legislation passes. I mean, or is very close to passing, and then reflect the macroeconomic consequences of those policies as they come.
Yeah, that made me think about Andy Constant. We talked to him about like the quarterly Treasury funding announcement. Like, he sees all these people like trying to predict the quarterly funding funding announcement. He just waits until it comes out and then says, all right, what are the implications? I already know what it is. It seems like a similar type of framework.
Yeah, I think, if anything, there is probably more clarity around the primary decision rules that are related to that than there are to like fiscal policy in a whole. Like, I'm like, literally, okay, so new administration comes in, like, is the 10% tariffs on everyone, is that rhetoric or is that policy? Is a 60% tariff on China, is that rhetoric? Is that policy? Will Congress accept that? Will they not accept that? Like, will they water it down? Will there be the constituency to do that? What sort of, exceptions are they going to make? Like, all of those questions are super pertinent to understanding whether or not it will have a meaningful macroeconomic consequence. And I'm going to be blunt about this. No one has any answers to those questions, because the answers to those questions will be determined by the electorate, which no one has predictive ability to determine what they're going to do. And number two, in the head of the people who get elected, which, like, who the heck knows? And so, like, what are you doing? If someone's going to, it's a person who comes in and says, I know for certain that there's going to be larger deficits, certain tariffs, policy in this direction, policy in that direction, like, they're totally overconfident, right? And so you're much better off putting yourself in a position to say, look, I don't really know what's going to exactly transpire, particularly in a bimodal, highly uncertain outcome where the actual policy implementation isn't clear. Like, put yourself in a position so that you're not overweight any particular outcome because you don't really know what particular outcome will happen. and that you don't have any implicit or explicit bets on the politics or the policy, and wait to see the politics and the policy as they come in. So it's a risk management exercise. Politics in general, particularly elections, I should say, are risk management exercises much more than they are opportunities for alpha.